So let's continue on with the new patient marketing, and we've covered several topics, and let's do a walkthrough here of what we need to be paying attention to in all these topics and not violate. So let's walk through the new patient marketing and how it works and how to significantly increase your effectiveness, and be aware there's some things that you'll do, and if you're not aware of this, it'll totally destroy or significantly diminish the effectiveness of your marketing. That's what we're going to cover right now. So having said that, let's get started. So we always say it always starts with a target market. Okay? You always need to know your target market. All right. And we said there's several categories we want to pay attention to. These cannot be violated. If you violate this even before you get into the marketing, you've already lost. So let's go into demographics. Okay. Now, demographics is who buys. That's who buys. And we're talking about familial status, income, age, sex, occupation, things of that nature, okay? So what are a couple things that we're going to pay attention to here with demographics is the main concept, without going into great detail, because we actually go into great detail of all of these categories, isolate them out when we do marketing, and then we isolate them out, and that's only the segment that we target. Okay, so what are we going to pay attention to with demographics? We're going to pay attention to blue collar. We're going to pay attention to blue collar is what we're going to pay attention to. That's the big word, blue collar. And the reason blue collar utilizes chiropractic more than white collar is they need their joints for survival. They need their joints for food, for work, primarily, and then work supplies shelter and food. And that's what you'll see when patients come in. Now, remember, out of the 6 socioeconomic classes, only 5 of them can afford chiropractic care. Only 2 of them can afford to cut a check up front. That's the white collar. So it's real important that we pay attention to knowing how to do terms. So terms is what's most important with blue collar. And remember, it doesn't matter if there's not a perceived need with a group that doesn't utilize chiropractic. And I see this mistake all the time. I see doctors opening offices in upper middle class white collar because that's where they want to live. And that's not the target market of chiropractic. They don't need their joints. Even though they have the money to pay, because I hear a lot of chiropractors say that. They go, well, they got the money to pay. That's not what it's about. What it's about is, is there a need? If there's no need, it doesn't matter if they have the money to pay. And they don't have a need overwhelmingly. They don't use their joints. Lawyers, doctors, accountants, they don't use their joints. Plumbers do. Electricians do. Roofers do. That's who needs their joints. The joint, in other words, their back. And when it affects their survival, that's when they're willing to pay. So if they don't have a need and it doesn't affect their survival, even if they don't have the money, they're not paying. So that's what's important, is going into the target market who has the highest probability of need in survival and security. The key now is to know how to go into terms. That's the key, because they're the ones who are definitely willing to pay. They have to pay. They have to pay because that's survival for them. Okay, so demographics. Then we're going to go into psychographics. And that's psychographics is why. And you've got to know this when you do your different marketing campaigns, because look how hard it is to change your opinion. Look how hard it would be to change your belief system. That's what that is. And so you'll go broke. And so you want to make sure that you do not go into a category of, with your marketing, of people who don't even believe in chiropractic or acknowledge it or value it. Doesn't matter if they have a problem or not. Now, there's about 65 different psychographic categories. So we said there's about 7 demographic categories. There's about 65 psychographic categories, and I do a deep dive into those, but just be aware that that becomes real important. Now, how you can also, it's good to know this, but let me share with you how easy it is to do it, is nowadays all you have to do is take your emails, or your patient's name and addresses and send them to the direct marketing company. Or in this case, if you were going to do Facebook pay-per-click, you could literally upload your patient list. And you could upload your best patient list. You can upload your 20 percenters and say, target my marketing to those characteristics. That's how easy you can do a lot of the demographics, psychographics, and geographics, okay? So without even knowing the detail, you can just use the existing people who are purchasing your product, because we already know they fit, and then go to the highest probability of those people, the 20 percenters that have at least referred one person. That's the real sweet spot, that and the 3%. And then take those people, submit it to your direct marketing company or to Facebook and say, reverse engineer, and these are the characteristics, the demographics, psychographics, and geographics of the target market that I want to use. That's how you want to do it, without knowing the details of all 65 categories or all 7 categories of demographics. Okay, now you have geographics. And that's how far they're willing to come to you. And it is not a concentric circle. It has to do with how much resistance there is and what the frequency is. The more resistance and the higher the frequency, the less further people are willing to travel. Like in New York City, they're not going to travel 3 miles for a gallon of milk. The geographic radius, and every profession is different. Dentists is different than attorneys. Everybody has their own geographic radius of draw and psychographic barriers, especially geographic radius of draw. So how far? Well, people come to chiropractors 3 times a week or daily. So they're not going to do that 45 minutes. Now, attorney will have a much greater geographic radius of draw. They may see him once, and nowadays they may not even see him. They may just do Zoom. But if they do, it might just be once or twice. So if you're going to see somebody, you're willing to go a much further distance. So, a typical attorney, the geographic radius of draw would typically be the county, because the county courthouse, and they're dealing with the same people all the time. That's not true for chiropractic. So in an inner city, it's 1 mile. 80% of your business will come from in 1 mile. In a suburb, it's really 2.5 miles, no more than 3. You'll get 80% of your business within 3 miles. People think it's way further than what it is, and it's not. And then it's limited by your psychographic barriers, which we'll get into in just a second. So we're talking geographic, how far somebody's willing to drive. And it has to do with traffic and stoplights and distance and time and frequency of how often they got. And all these factors, as well as psychographic barriers, enter our mind. There's people that won't go across the bridge. They won't even go a mile to buy a product or service across the bridge because they don't want to go across the bridge. That's a psychographic barrier, see? So we have to know what that is. All your marketing starts with geographics. And I see this violated all the time. Chiropractors who do marketing 10 miles away and 5 miles away and 15 miles away. I'm like, you're just wasting your time. Totally wasting your time. And they're not even considering psychographic barriers. So I remember I had one client, he went 9 miles away. He's in a suburb, so his geographic radius of draw was 3 miles. And it was a confined psychographic area. It's a well-defined city. So the company he hired with marketing sends him 9 miles away in the wrong direction. So they violated the geographic radius of draw. And then they sent them in the wrong direction, going away from economics as opposed to, or toward economics as opposed to in toward it. And I'll get into that with you, psychographics, in just a second. And there's more resistances for people to come to his office, if he even did get him to sign up. And then his gateway was massage. Wasn't even chiropractic. So then he had to convert him from a massage. So he had the wrong gateway, wrong psychographic barriers, and wrong geographics. And he was burnt out. I said, you're not going to, he joined me, and I said, you're not going to do that. I said, you're violating everything there is. We're not going to do that. So we're staying within the parameters of why people buy chiropractic, and you got to know them. So, and by the way, that doctor now has 2 offices and 2 associate doctors. Okay. CEO or geographic radius of draw. So in the inner city, it's typically 1 mile. Suburb, it's 3. In the country, it's typically 7 miles. People in the country will get in a car and drive 5 miles for gas and milk because that's what they're used to, and it's easy. It's straight down the highway. You're not dealing with a lot of traffic or lights or resistances. There you go. Okay, next claim, psychographic barriers, PSY, psychographic barriers. Most people don't know this, and that becomes a huge limiting factor. Your marketing will significantly not work if you just violate this. An example, in my office, to the north of me, my geographic radius was only 2 miles. I was in a bedroom community. So you would think they'd drive further. No, it was 2 miles. Why? Because there was an interstate, psychographic barrier. There was a county line right at the interstate, psychographic barrier. And the economic hub was on the other side. Well, people don't drive away from economic hubs. They're not used to it. That's not familiar. That seems like it's a long way when you drive away. Driving in is easy because that's what people do all the time, usually for work. And that's exactly what happened to me. My psychographic barrier south of me was 9 miles. Well, it was another little town. Well, those people in those towns drove right by the interstate, right by my office twice a day, going into work, into the inner city. They didn't think anything about coming to my office. People over 2 miles, just on the other side of the psychographic barriers, they wouldn't come at all. Just like that. If you don't know that, so you need to know your geographic radius of draw from the north, south, east, and west. And it is not concentric. Okay, and to the east of me, it was just fields. It was residential and fields. So eventually, so it was like 10 miles going to the east of me until you hit another city. To the west of me was 2 miles again because it was a national forest. So I had 2, 2, 9, and actually lower is a little lower because those people would come up, 9 and 10, see? Why? Because of, well, 3 of the locations had to do with psychographic barriers. One of them was a geographic barrier. They eventually stopped because it was too far. It was closer to go somebody next door, see? Okay, so you violate that, and you know, by the way, how did I learn that? I learned the hard way. I spent money marketing up there, didn't get anything, spent money marketing down south, and got a lot of business. That's how it works. Okay, so that's psychographic barriers. All right, so again, how much could we have messed up to this point to significantly decrease our marketing? And one example I use also, not just mine, is I was down to what's the youth? It's like arena football. Well, who goes to arena football? If you don't know, it's young males. That's who goes to arena football. So I'm down in the arena, and I see a billboard along the wall. You know how they do advertising along the wall, and it was this chiropractor. Well, number one, he was 25 miles away. He just lost. Number two, he violated the psychographic barrier in versus out. These people aren't driving from the other side of that arena, because here's the arena. They came from all the way around. So it's, even from the arena, a lot of these people, it was more than 25 miles. And then he violated the psychographic barriers. They had to go over bridges and interstates and the distance, the geographic distance. And then you get to the marketing, and then he had the wrong target market. He had young males on there, the worst potential patient for health care. They don't pay attention to their health. They don't take out health insurance. And then he did advertising. He did what's called name brand advertising. He just had his name up there. And small businesses never should do what's called name brand advertising. It should always be direct mail because you can't afford it. It's called advertising for the generals. We see 7,000 messages a day. And how hard is it to get your message? So-and-so chiropractic. And I say this to doctors all the time. They think there's actually branding with small businesses, and there's not. Small businesses do not have the money to brand. You don't have the money to overcome 7,000 messages a day. You know how much money it took for Nike, that swish, to be associated with Nike? That was millions and millions of dollars. And to drive my point home, I always say to the chiropractor, I said, well, in a half-mile radius, name one optometrist. You know, and the chiropractor's been there 10 years. He can't name one optometrist who's been there 10 years. I say, name one dentist. See, he can't do it. All these normal business, name one accountant. He can't do it, but he's been there 10 years. Well, how much branding has been going on with? You can't. It has to be direct response. It cannot be name recognition advertising. Once again, you lose a lot of money. Okay, so that's psychographic bears. And then we're going to go into the gateways. And that's the big one with chiropractic. That's the number one rule in marketing that's violated with chiropractic. And the number one rule in marketing is you have to be something to somebody. In other words, you can't just try to get the whole market. You got to narrow down demographics, psychographics, geographics, and you got to go after a very narrow slice of pie to actually earn that market share. That's marketing. That's the reality. That's not chiropractic. Chiropractic goes after everybody with gateways and this thing called subluxation. So they say they can treat asthma, allergy, bedwetting, cancer. There you go. And there you have it. That's why chiropractic said 8% utilization after 20 plus years. And a 67% negative name recognition. It'd be the same thing if dentists said they treated asthma, allergy, and bedwetting with the meridians from the molars. Same thing. And the profession just doesn't get it. It doesn't get it. Nobody buys subluxations. Nobody. I have 77 offices in 20 years. 600,000 patient visits a year. Not one patient came in to have their subluxations checked. Not one. You not only not get people, you'll create a paradigm shift and create a defensive reaction. You'll actually lose credibility. Just like you won't go back to the dentist when you go first, and he says, yeah, I can treat your asthma through your molars and the meridians in your molars. You won't go back to that dentist. You'll think he's a whack job. That's why there's 67% negative name recognition. So gateways is the number one problem with chiropractic. And it's not going to change, and it hasn't changed because it's a sense of duty. It's the highest calling there is. That's why it hasn't, and that's why it's not going to. So, what are the gateways? Well, the gateways in chiropractic, the market has spoken. 100 plus years. It's back pain, neck pain, and headaches. That's 84% of the reason people pick chiropractic. So if you market anything outside of that, now remember, we're only talking about 88% of people actively looking. So if you market anything outside of that, you're already starting with a small number. It just gets smaller real fast. So and it's limited by your geographic radius of draw and your competitors. And this is a great way to go broke when you do these things. Okay, so those are the gateways. I did $80 million a year on back pain and neck pain. That's it. We didn't market anything else. 7% of the reason people come to a chiropractor is extremities. We're still in the neuromusculoskeletal category. Extremities. There's a huge percentage of people that don't even think chiropractors know anything or treat knees or shoulders or elbows. And if they do, it's a percentage of 7% of 8%. I mean, how small of these numbers are we getting? They're getting ridiculously small, especially when we tied in your geographic radius of draw, psychographic barriers, and your competition. It's ridiculous. So this is a killer. This is a killer, a common killer right here. Geographic radius of draw. These are common killers with chiropractic advertising. I remember I was on Google one time and I saw an ad. I'm in Southeast Florida and I see an ad for chiropractor in Northwest Florida. It was 4 hours away. Pay-per-click. What did that tell me immediately? Either the agency he's working with doesn't know what they're doing, or he did it himself and he doesn't know what he's doing. He's just wasting his money. Okay, So that's gateways. That's a big one. That's a huge one right there. That's huge. And I'll just tell you why this happens. There's only 8% of the population looking for chiropractors. 92% aren't. Well, the chiropractor thinks there's no more business in that market because they don't know how to go into the 92% market. They don't know educational sales. So when it's very limited in what they do get, that's why they think they have to add something else. Laser, another machine, another gateway, stem cell. You know, what's the flavor of the month for chiropractors? They're constantly chasing without paying any consideration into market forces and how and why people buy products and services. No, what they should have done is increase the effectiveness of their advertising for the 8%. But really what they should have done is learn educational sales to the 92%. Because that's where all the business is at. It's not at the 8%. Okay, so that's gateways. Next is USP. And chiropractors mess this up all the time in that when we do buy, in other words, we're only talking about the 8% now that have a perceived need that are going to look. When we do buy, there's only, it's called USP, unique sales position. We'll buy because of one of 5 reasons. And they're different for every industry. Now, number one is always the same in every industry, trust. We'd rather go to a trusted source first, like a referral, something like that, somebody that knows somebody, because that helps solve the second need, highest need in life, which is security. That's why that is so important. Now, this gets to be real important when we go into our marketing, because that's the first place we're going to go is into the high trust circle, because that's the first place they want to go. Number 2 is with chiropractic, it's location. 75% of the people, if it's not a referral, it's going to be location driven. That's the majority of the reason they'll pick. Number 3 is price. That's about 15%, something like that. And it's usually a combination thereof. It's not like black or white, one or the other kind of thing. So yeah, we'd like a trusted source, but if it's 100 miles away, we're not going. See? So this is the mosaic that we put together. Well, this is the mosaic that we need to pay attention to when we're coming back out to market. So we've got trust, we've got location, and as soon as you go down the price, it's 15, 20%. And then service factors are 3%. Service factors are like you open late, you open on Saturdays, you know, you advertise, you have your own x-ray. Those are called service factors. Well, only 3% of the people will pick a service factor. So now we're talking about 3% of 8%. Do we really want to spend any time or money on 3% of 8%? That's called ridiculous. And the last reason people will pick a professional like a chiropractor is quality. And it's only 3%. And the reason is they assume we have quality just because you're a licensed professional, whether you're an attorney, an accountant, plumber, electrician. They assume that you're going to get that service. You're going to get that quality. That's why. And, you know, some of these doctors think they're going to get business by getting a CC, you know, DACBN, DACBR, CCSP, all these certifications. You're not. That's not what's going to draw business. That's 3%. And then I say, well, when's the last time you called on a dentist and you wanted to know his credentials? When's the last time you went to an optometrist and you wanted to know his credentials? And that's the reason why you picked him. See? Okay, USP. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Next one is going to be vehicle delivery. We're going to pay attention to vehicle delivery. So you can do all of these right, and if you're on the wrong vehicle delivery, and how, in other words, how to communicate with those people, they miss everything. So there's different degrees of vehicles of delivery. Where's the first source of vehicle delivery? What's the second source? And of course, it decreases as you go down. There you go. So that's why the very first vehicle of delivery is through your patients to their circle of influence. That's the highest, greatest, it's what people pay attention to, and it's the most trusted. That door is wide open. That door, you don't have to open the door there. So vehicle of delivery we pay attention to. That's like I had some of the stuff you see as on Facebook from chiropractors is just outlandish. Chiropractor said, in this chiropractic forum says, what do you think about advertising on TikTok? And there's actually chiropractors that responded, oh yeah, it's the newest, latest thing. And I just responded, if you want an attorney, are you going to go to TikTok? If you're looking for an optometrist, are you going to go to TikTok? End of story. It's all about reverse engineering. Knowing what consumers, how and why consumers buy products and services, and doing the same thing. That's what gets business. That's called good marketing. Not winging it and just trying different stuff. So how much could we have gotten wrong up to this point, and we haven't even started our marketing? We could have targeted the wrong demographics, which happens all the time. You could have targeted the wrong psychographics. You do that, it's already over. You're not changing somebody's belief system. You violate the geographics, it's over. It doesn't matter. You violate psychographic barriers, or you don't even know them. You have to know your geographic radius of drawing, your psychographic barriers, period. That's the first thing you learn in marketing. Because anything outside of that is wasted time and money. You better not violate gateways. How many computers are you going to buy from Pizza Hut? How many cars are you going to buy from Kentucky Fried Chicken? You better not violate gateways. And chiropractors do that all the time. It's amazing. I see on Facebook chiropractors promoting more of everything else that are non-gateways than back pain and neck pain. They'll promote the immune system, asthma, allergy. I mean, it's amazing. They'll do everything but what pays the mortgage. It's crazy. $80 million a year, only marketed two things, back pain and neck pain. But I wasn't limited to the 8%. I knew how to go into the 92%. So now my market became essentially way more business than I can handle. So, okay, so you got gateway vehicle delivery. Okay, this is where it all starts. Now, doesn't matter if it's a potential new patient. We're going to pay attention to all of these, and obviously we want the highest probability in all of these. Okay, and then. This also works on any other marketing you're doing. If you're going to market to attorneys, this applies to attorneys too. It's just different for attorneys, that's all. It's like I had one chiropractor said, I think I'm going to move my office. He goes, there's not many attorneys where I'm at. I go, where are you at? Oakland, California. There's over 100,000 people in a 3-mile radius of draw. And she wanted to move over to the county hub. So why you want to move over there? Well, that's where the attorneys are. Said the attorneys aren't your patients. The attorney's clients are your patients, and the attorney's clients are in your backyard, which you're getting ready to move out of. That's a chiropractor. That's what's going on. The good news is that's your competition. Maybe you. Good news is that's your competition. That's why I say there is no competition in chiropractic. Okay. So that's where we're going to start. Okay. Now, depending on the marketing we're going to do, the next thing we're going to pay attention to is a campaign. Now, a campaign for regular patients, an example of a campaign, is like, let's say you do a pay-per-click ad, right? And they click on it. Well, what's one of the worst things you could do is not capture them with a follow-up educational sales 3-step video series. That's one of the worst things you could do. That will significantly decrease the effectiveness. In other words, that's the campaign. What's the purpose of the campaign? The campaign is a multi-step process, and the purpose is to increase awareness, interest, desire, and action. That's the purpose of the campaign. Well, that's what that does when you drop them into an opt-in, and it's one video and then the next video, or even if it's not a video, text or whatever. That's stirring awareness, interest, and desire. In other words, that's a pre-sale. That's what that is. There's formulas for that. That's not random either. You say this, and you say this. Okay? So we pay attention to that. Now, you don't do that, you significantly hurt your marketing when you're just asking for the referral or the new business immediately, okay? So depending on what we're doing, we want to pay attention to the campaign, and we pay a lot of attention to this with attorneys. Most of the difficult marketing with attorneys is the campaign. It's not even the sales. The sales is relatively easy once you know it. It's the campaign. The target market's pretty easy. So when we're talking about patients, that's an example of a campaign. So in relative to, now, when we go into each of the different categories of marketing and we break it down and we go, okay, you do this first, this second, this third, we'll cover exactly all these steps and how it works. Do this first, this second, this third, to significantly increase the awareness. Another example is your patient base. Your patients, you should be communicating with all your past patients at least once a week. And it should be a certain format. It should be problem, solution. Okay, in other words, we cover the format. Not how, what the latest recipe is to build a cake. I saw that one time. This chiropractor sends out a newsletter, and part of her newsletter was, the newest recipe for a cake. I don't go to a dentist for a cake. That just tells you how far off people are. So, depending on the marketing we're doing, and also that's important because you significantly increase the effectiveness of your marketing 50% if they receive your message at least 3 times. That's why you never do something once. Okay? So, we're going to pay attention to this. Then this takes us over to the marketing. And we've got 3 types. We got publicity, we got advertising, and we got educational sales. And again, it's all based on the core formula. So let's start with publicity. Need. So the core formula now is need is equal to money times time divided by trust. Okay? You know this formula and you're good at it, you're gonna get a lot of business. Okay. So publicity doesn't work very well because it only affects trust. Only one of the 4 categories, and it's only going to work on people who are looking for the product or service. In chiropractic, that's only 8%. So am I going to use publicity solely for marketing? No way. Now, we will use it in a campaign to help to stir awareness, interest, desire, and trust, and name recognition, but we will not use it. Just try to get business outright. Next, advertising. Now you have 2 different types of advertising that we talked about. You got name recognition and you got direct response. You should never do any name recognition at all. The only name recognition you should have is on your sign at the front of your on the roadway. That's name recognition advertising. You will never have enough money to get your name in front of people to where they remember it. It's top of mind consciousness when they think of that product or service. You will go broke. Never, ever do name recognition advertising. You're going to do direct response. If you do advertising, it's going to be direct response advertising. Direct response takes this group right here and it puts them through a funnel. A funnel, in other words, a sell series, whether it's videos, contacts, emails. The vehicle of delivery can be anything. Some are way better than others. Okay? Obviously, the best is personalization. That's number 1 in everything, bar none, period. Okay. So we pay attention to direct response in some of these marketing things that we do. But this is essentially what should be happening. As an example, once a week, all your past patients should be hearing from you. How you solve the gateway. Why? Well, they have a circle of influence of 7. 8% of those people are looking for a chiropractor every year. So let's say you have 5,000 past patients. Multiply that times 7, 5 times 7, 35,000 times 8%. That's your potential for that month of business. That could be significant. I mean, there's chiropractors that join me that have been in practice 20 years and they'll have 10, 15, 20,000 people and they haven't even talked to them at all. I'm like, oh my God. And I see them do the same thing with attorneys. They don't communicate with their attorneys at all. And of course they're not getting any referrals. And you know, my common line is, go ahead and tell your wife you only love her once when you get married and that's it, or you know, and see how well that relationship works out. You got to communicate with your patient, and it's got to be the right communication. So we're going to go into exactly what to say, but the bottom line is you don't violate the basics of gateways. It's going to be gateways, pleasure, logic, fear. There's going to be some major components that are always going to be in your advertising. And when you send it out to your patient, see, that's what keeps top of mind awareness. That's what it helps to enhance reactivations. That's what helps to enhance new patients. And that's the first place the patients are going to go. That's the first, they're going to talk to a family member, friends that you know of a chiropractor. Okay? So you're not going to get a lot of business, but the business you get is going to be high quality. It will not be a cold call business. It will be high quality. And then you can increase the effectiveness depending on your advertising. Remember, there's 14 emotional categories. The more of those that you get right, the more effective the advertising becomes. There you go. But that's an example of a campaign. That's what that is. That's a campaign. It's just a regular campaign. Once a week, you should be communicating. Even if it's just you're announcing that you're closed for the holiday. They're at least hearing from you. You're staying on top of mind consciousness. But you're making a tremendous mistake by not communicating. And that's what chiropractors do. They don't pay any attention to their past business, and they spend money going after cold calls. That's the classic chiropractic downfall. Okay, so if you do advertising, we want to do direct response, but we don't want to do advertising. If we do, it's going to be very limited. That's not where the quality business is. And remember, that's only 8%. That's only going to work for the 8%. That's it. So there's a few categories we'll pay attention to that in. And there's actually 2 that you definitely want to do it, period. And we cover these. And then, of course, there's the educational sales. Now, the reason advertising doesn't work as well, again, is advertising can affect money, time, or trust. It's still not doing anything for need. That's why it doesn't affect the 92%. Educational sales does. Covers all of them. That takes knowledge. You got to know something. That's what gets a ton of business. That's why I can look at 10 people, get 7 of them as new patients, and none of them were expected to go to a chiropractor. That's how we open 77 offices in 20 states. That's where there's total abundance, but there's a difference. That takes knowledge and skill. You don't have to know anything for advertising. You can just hire an advertising agency. So it doesn't take any effort, but it costs money, costs a lot of money, and it's not very effective. Educational sales is directly the opposite. You have to know something. You got to be good at something. Doesn't cost much or nothing at all, and you get the best quality of patients. Most doctors aren't willing to put the effort in to learn the skill and the knowledge to get the highest quality, highest abundance of patients. They stick with passive least resistance, highest cost, lowest quality. That's what happens. Okay, so that takes care of the types of marketing. All right, so let's go into some of these categories. Let's pay attention to higher and lower probability potential patients, right? We want to pay attention to the circle of influence, right? Each of us has a circle of influence. Under the roof, inner circle, mother, father, that's the highest probability patient right there. That's the easiest two patients to get right there, is the spouse or the kid. Next is mother, father, including in-laws. That's the next easiest patients, because there's already high trust, and we can easily find out if they have a gateway problem at all. And remember, 68% of them do, based on the S-curve of economics. They're just not looking for a chiropractor. This is why chiropractors get, I don't know what the word would be, why they get blindsided. They think just because a certain amount of people are not actively looking for them, their product or service, that it doesn't exist. And that can be no further than the truth. And then so they think it's very limited and doesn't exist, so what's the chiropractor do? He turns and does something else. He goes to stem cell therapy, or he goes to neuropathy, or whatever the latest whiz-bang in chiropractic is. And then the same market of forces apply there, but now you start violating, and it even gets harder. Like if you go to neuropathy, most people with neuropathy think of going to a chiropractor. No, they think of going to their general practitioner or a neurologist. Same with extremities. You start at marketing extremities, well, that's 7%. The total extremities is 7% of 8%. That's not even one particular. So if you pick the shoulder, that's a real small percentage of 7% of 8%. Say, this is how chiropractors go down fast. Spend a lot of money, spend a lot of time, spin in circles, get stuck. The national average of patient visits to a chiropractor is 107. That's half of what they could see. Most chiropractors, if they actually got the business, could physically and emotionally see about 180 to 220 visits a week in and week out. Most chiropractors do 50% of what they could do. That's a lot of money lost. That's over $200,000 a year lost. You multiply that over 10 years, you're at over $2 million. You could have retired just from that alone in 10 years. So we're going to pay attention to circle of influence first, and then we're going to go, let's pay attention to age. Well, let's simplify it. Let's go from zero. Let's do infants. That's a separate category. That's a separate gateway. That's a whole mess. Most people think you're going to hurt the kid. They don't want their infant kid's neck cracked. That's a whole nother world right there, and that's got to be real tight ends, circle of influence. And I see on Facebook chiropractors get a kick out of this. It's amazing how many chiropractors take a picture and put it on Facebook of them, looking like they're going to adjust the baby's neck. And to them they think it's like a proud child. You have no idea how that scares the hell out of moms that don't know anything about chiropractic. Okay, and it's not even a gateway. What percentage of kids go to a chiropractic office? I mean, the only kids I got were the ones that I created from my existing patients who came in for back or neck pain. Okay, so that's one age group as kids. Let's take it up from like 6 years old up to 18. Again, that's a category. Now, the good news about that category is there's high emotional appeal. If there's any problems there, the parent, especially the mother, will pay for it. So that's a high target market probability when you have, I always say, if you want to increase your practice 20, 25% in 30, 60 days, learn how to do the Kids Day educational sales. That's the highest emotional purchase there is right there. But you have to know educational sales because those people are not looking to take their kids to a chiropractor. So that takes us past the legal age, 18. So we go to 18. So we're going to divide it up and say, let's say from 0 to 6 kids, we talked about that. 6 to 18, we talked about that. Now we're going to go from 18, and I'm going to take it up to 30. Let's just divide it out up to that. Well, we have irresponsible people at that age. They're still trying to find themselves. They don't typically have steady work. They're still trying to get on their feet. So that's a bad target market, generally speaking, unless there's major trauma. Otherwise, they don't care about their health. They don't care about the follow-up. So I don't want to spend any time directly targeting these people. And they have the lowest probability of having a gateway, back pain or neck pain. So you see, if I do anything in that age, it's going to be from my patient base, and that's it. I'm not spending any money going after those people at all. Next, over 30, and let's go from 30 to, let's say, 30 to 50. That's solid. That's solid. Matter of fact, the highest probability target market's a 42-year-old female, middle class, lower class, blue collar. That's the highest probability target market right there. That's solid. They're stable, they have jobs, they're responsible, they take care of themselves. These are good generalizations, by the way. And they're willing to pay. Their health is important to them. Now, they may not be able to pay. Most of them can't pay up front all the money. If you're charging $1,000, $2,000 or $3,000, they can pay terms. So you got to know how to do terms. And they'll pay terms for their problems because they need their spine and their back for their occupation, whether it's work or taking care of their family. So the need is survival security. It's the highest. Okay, that's real solid. We'll definitely go after that market. Let's go from 50 to 65. Very high probability. What's the likelihood somebody 50 to 65, and I picked 65 because of retirement and Medicare. What's the likelihood somebody 50 to 65 has back pain, neck pain, headaches, arthritis, joint pain? Off the charts. You put 10 people in front of me that I don't know that's between 50 and 65, I've got 10 new patients with educational sales, just like that. That's off the charts. So we're going to pay a lot of attention to our patients, mother and father, especially mother, and we'll get into gender in here in just a second. Now, 65 and over, something interesting happens with CAM. CAM is complementary alternative medicine, and that's chiropractic. It goes down significantly. Utilization of CAM goes down significantly. And there's different reasons that they believe that, but at this particular time, most people are turning to medicine for their health care once they get over 65. There's a lot less distrust. They pay a lot more pay attention to stability, tried and true, things like that. So, but if they are 65 or older, once again, what's the likelihood that that person has an old injury, back pain, neck pain, or joint pain, to some degree? It's off the charts. Now, we're talking about Medicare, right? Essentially, talking about Medicare. But that's a high target market probability. If you're okay with doing Medicare, that's a real high target probability. So that's, especially when you do no educational sales, that's shooting ducks in a barrel. I mean, really. Okay, let's go into gender. And believe it or not, we're only going to talk about two genders. We're only going to talk about male and female. So let's go into the pros and cons of male or female. Well, and we got to kind of look at it also in relationship to age and personality. But let's make some generalizations. So generally speaking, young kids 0 to 6, gender is not going to be as important. When they're from 6 to 18, not going to be as important. A lot of times little kids are more rambunctious and, tangle and fight and this and that or whatever. But now you have the girls that are in cheerleading and, tumbling and gymnastics, and so it's not going to make that much of a difference. And then let's just kind of run past the gender age at 18 to 30. And this is the only good thing about that, gender-wise, is a woman matures faster than a male. You can find mature women at 25 years old. It's pretty hard to find a mature man at 25. Men generally don't start accepting responsibility until they're like over 30. So you can find younger women that have jobs, stable jobs, take care of themselves, that are buying and not renting. So you can generalize there. And then, of course, once you get over 30 to 50, That's the highest target market probability, especially if they're married. Remember, 87% of the women in the household write the monthly checks. They are the absolute highest probability target market. They pay attention. They act on their conditions. They actually go to doctors with problems when the counterpart male won't with the same problem. They're way more responsible, willing to pay. That's a real high target market. I remember one time we did a campaign specifically for teachers. This particular county had good insurance, and the majority of the teachers were female. So we specifically targeted a marketing campaign just for the female teachers of that county. Paying attention to all these factors. This is how you get business. Okay. So we said 30 to 50. Same 50 or 65. Now, the great thing about gender, when you go, and males the same. Here's the key with males when you go from 30 to 50. You got to focus on work. Males pay attention to how problems affect their work or their hobbies. And the example I give all the time is this patient came in the spring up in the Midwest where there's 4 seasons where I practiced. And he had elbow problems. So this is like April. So in other words, it's time to get out and play golf. He couldn't play golf in the wintertime. So now he comes in, I do his history, I go, how long is it going to go on? It's months, 6 months, 8 months. Why didn't he see me for the elbow problem 3, 4, 5 months ago? He wasn't playing golf. He wasn't using the joint. Now he started using the joint. His hobby was golf. He couldn't golf. Now he's willing to spend time or money. That's how it works. Men, we focus on work and hobbies with the marketing. That's where their value system is relative to problems. Women, especially if they're married with kids, will focus on cooking, cleaning, and laundry. And no, this is not sexist. It's called probabilities versus possibilities. And it's actually a course in college called statistics. That's what it's called. It's called statistics. Okay, so we talked about men 30 to 50, which is good if it's work-related, hobby-related. Now you go to 50 to 65, same thing. What's the likelihood a man has a problem that's age 50 to 65, that's blue collar, off the charts? We have huge potential of new patients right here. They're just not looking for chiropractors, which means your advertising will not work and neither will your publicity. The educational sales will bring them in left and right. Over 65, the same thing happens. Everything significantly drops. And it's always the women that are going to pay more attention to their problem than the men. And the women will know the problems of the men and want more for the men than the men will want for themselves. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. Where the woman had to drag the husband in for care. There you go. Okay, let's go to another major category, is personalities. Let's go into personalities, because this does play a role, especially with referrals. So we're going to go into 4 major personalities. So we're going to say there's the high sanguine, that's the life of the party. Then we're going to say there's the high choleric, dominant personality. That's the person that wants control. And then there's the melancholy, that's the person who always wants to be right. And then there's the passive phlegmatic, and they just want to get along. So you go, okay, well, how does this relate to new patients? Well, which ones are higher probability of getting? Now, as a standalone on their own, it is what it is, and we'll just leave that alone. But when it comes to referrals, this can play a big role, because some of these patients are much easier to get than others. And so as an example, if your patient is a certain, because remember, we marry and have relationships with opposites. Opposites attract. Yet two cholerics won't get along in the same category. Two melancholies won't get along in the same category. I tell that to my patients all the time. When I see another high choleric come in, I go, hey, we've got to study personalities first, because the very first problem we're going to have is communicating, because you want to be in control and I want to be in control. So we need to understand each other first. That's how it works. So with patients, we're going to pay attention to the opposite, okay? So we'll pay attention to the personality and the gender, okay? So let's say your patient is sanguine male. So let's run through the males first and then the females. And they're married to the opposite. So your patient's a sanguine male. What's the likelihood of getting their significant other? And we're talking about heterosexual relationships, because that's the probability according to statistics. Okay. Who is a high sanguine going to be attracted to? Well, it's going to be a melancholy or a choleric. So if it's a male, talking to female, well, that's good. They control the checkbooks. They're responsible for their problems, and they're going to be more of controlling. It's going to be a choleric or melancholy. So this person, the male, so this male, if we said they're sanguine, so they're married to a high probability melancholy or choleric, okay? But it's a female. So what's the likelihood of getting that person? Well, will the male know of that person's problems? No. Men generally don't. They don't have a clue what's going on with their wife's problems until they're about to die. That's what I found. It's the opposite with the women. So the man generally won't know much about that person, whether they have a problem or not, and they won't be able to control them. They're the passive ones. So it decreases. It decreases. So if I did want to go after this person, what am I going to pay attention to when I go after this person? If it's a female, I'm going to go after, if it's a female that works or that has kids, I'm going after the gateways with cooking, cleaning, and laundry. That's where I'm going with this one. Now let's say you have a male choleric. They're definitely married to a passive. They're married to a sanguine or phlegmatic. So once again, the male's not going to know much about that person, but it's going to be easy to get them in. Easy because it's a female. They probably have problems depending on the age group, and their decision, and they're more responsible, and they control the checkbook. So when I get a strong patient, a choleric melancholy, and it's the same with the melancholy, I have a high probability of getting that spouse in. A lot of times I have to go around this patient. In other words, I'll get them in from the new patient orientation. That's where I'll get them. Because the patient won't help me. He's a male. He doesn't know what's going on with them. He's not too involved with, other problems, and he's just going about his life. So that's the same with melancholy. So you take a melancholy male, that he's going to be married to a sanguine, same thing, a sanguine phlegmatic female. So it's a high probability patient, especially if they're over 30 years old. They're responsible, they take care of the bills, they typically will have a gateway problem. I'll typically have to bypass the spouse, and what's the easiest route to bypass the spouse is the new patient orientation. I'll get that patient like 9 out of 10 times. Then you go to the passive phlegmatic male. Well, again, he's a male and he's passive. So now he's married to a dominant, strong woman. Well, again, women will have the problems, etc., especially over 30. But getting them in is going to be a problem. And getting her in is going to be a problem because they're in control. They do what they want to do. So that'll be a little more difficult. And again, it depends on the degree of the problem also, obviously. Higher the degree of the problem, the easier it is to get anybody in. But we'll pay attention to that. So anytime there's a potential woman on the other side, we got a high probability patient. If it's a man on the other side, in other words, your spouse, the opposite is a man, and they're over 30, we got a high probability patient. But now I need to focus on work. I'm going to do everything. And the female will help me. They'll know of the man's problems, and they will help me get them in. So if I have a female sanguine, they're going to be married to a choleric. That's going to be a harder one. They'll know the choleric's problem, but the choleric's in control, and he doesn't pay attention to his problems unless they're affecting his work or hobbies. So if I do, I know I have to go after the work or hobbies. And I usually have to bypass this person because they're the more weaker one in the relationship to draw them in. Go to the melancholy, choleric female patient. Opposite's the male. Okay. They're in control. Good. They know if their person has a problem or not. Good. They know if it's affecting them in their work or hobbies. Good. And they control it. Ding, 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 ding. I got a winner. I got a high probability new patient right there. I'm going to get them in for day 4, new patient orientation, referral. I'm getting them in. Go down to this passive sanguine phlegmatic. Female, so they're married to a strong person. They will know the problem. Good. They control the checkbook. Good. They're willing to help. Good. But we're talking about a man. The spouse is a man. So where do I have to go? Work or hobbies. Am I going to typically be able to help her to bring them in? No, because they're passive. So I'm going to have to bypass them. And usually that's at the either day 4 or new patient orientation, or even direct marketing to that person. Say, this is how all of this comes together. And then I've got to know what to say and do. That's called educational sales. And there's some things you cannot say or do. And of course, we go into great detail with this. And let's face it, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's not easy. The good news is once you do it, once you understand it, you learn it, and you learn it like muscle memory, you create a ton of new patients. Just like right now. I mean, I just flowed through all this. Look how easy I think of new patients. See, I'm not waiting for them to call me. I'm creating them left and right. And I know where to go and what to say and what venue to do it. And that's how we opened 77 offices in 20 states, seeing over 600,000 patient visits a year. We didn't wait for the 8% to call. Okay, so having said this, how many things can you do wrong right now? And what do chiropractors typically do wrong? Well, there's a few things that they definitely do wrong all the time. Number one is they go after, I'll tell you the big one. The big one is gateways. They violate gateways. They start talking about things that people don't buy chiropractic with. That's the number one thing you can do wrong. Number two is they talk about wellness care. Nobody buys wellness care. That's a target market for chiropractic. Middle, lower class, blue collar people don't buy wellness care. They buy problems. And in over 600,000 visits a year, how many patients have I had come through that door did not have a problem, that just wanted to feel better and live an optimal life and their immune system function better? Zero. Zero. Not one. That's the weakest form of purchase there is, especially for middle class blue collar. They're still just trying to pay their bills and survive, pay their mortgage. So, wrong gateway, wrong marketing. They'll use advertising and not educational sales, and they'll talk about wellness care. Wrong gateway, subluxations, wellness care. Those are the big zingers that just kill chiropractors, and they don't have a clue, because tomorrow they're going to teach all the chiropractors to do that at school or not at school, at all the practice management groups. That's exactly they're going to teach them again tomorrow. Promote subluxations and wellness care, even though nobody's buying it. Okay, so let's go through all the things you can do wrong. Demographics, be in the wrong demographic category, be in the white collar category, upper white collar. Most people know enough not to go into the homeless. Solid blue collar people, that's affecting their survival and security is the people who pay their bills. Psychographics, that's why, and of course, without going into details of that, of the 65 different categories, you would just reverse engineer. If you did any marketing, you would just use your list, give it to whoever you're marketing it to. You do Facebook pay-per-click, you literally can upload the emails of your highest quality patients, your 20%ers, and they do all this for you. without you having to know any of it. You go, this is who I want to target, okay? These characteristics. And that's the only people that'll get your advertising. You got to know your geographic radius of draw. I see chiropractors violate that all the time. They think they get new patients from 20 miles away. Next is the psychographic barriers. Most chiropractors don't have a clue what a psychographic barrier is. Well, you're going to find out real quick, or it's going to cost you a lot of money before you eventually find out, if you ever do find out. So you have to know this fast, because all your marketing starts with your geographic radius of draw, psychographic barriers. That's where all marketing starts. You got to know your northern, southern, eastern, western boundaries, period. And you got to stay in those. Gateway, that's a huge one. That's a huge one. You don't even see chiropractors advertising for back pain anymore, or neck pain. Now it's to increase their immune system and, everything that nobody buys chiropractic for. That's a big one. That's a major problem in chiropractic. USP. The problem with USP, unique sales position, is chiropractors will use that with patients who have no need. That only is relevant after there's a perceived need for chiropractic. Then I care about trust, location, price, quality service, you see. If I don't have a perceived need, I don't care about any of those things. And that's the mistake that happens, especially in personal injury marketing. That's what chiropractors will push. There's no perceived need for the attorney, and the chiropractor will talk about service and quality. And he wonders why he doesn't get any business. Vehicle of delivery. What's their method? What's the method of them receiving information, especially healthcare related information? What are they looking at? Well, if you're in one vehicle and they're in another, you just missed them. It doesn't matter if you lined up everything, you just missed them. They're not looking for a chiropractor on TikTok. I would say just pay attention to your wife. Where does your wife go when she's looking for a dentist or a doctor for your child? There's your answers right there. Okay, then that takes us to the campaign, depending on what we're doing. And the whole interest of the campaign is really a pre-sale. It's multiple contacts to stir awareness, interest, and desire, increase trust, decrease defenses. That's what that's about. It's multiple contacts. You put this in front of a target market, you've got gold. You're heading in the right direction fast. Now you got to decide what kind of marketing you're going to do. Are you going to do publicity, advertising, or educational sales? Well, I'm going to do advertising if I'm going after the 8% that's looking for a chiropractor. Because there's already a perceived need, so I do not want to use educational sales. I definitely want to use advertising, and I definitely do not want to use name recognition advertising. I have to use direct response. And there's 14 emotional triggers, and I better talk about as many of those as I can, and I better do it at least 3 times minimum to increase the effectiveness of that advertising to that 8%. Then there's the educational sales. Well, that's only used for the 92% that are not looking for a chiropractor but have a problem. And then when we do use it, we're going to start with the highest trust category because that's the first place everybody looks. So we're going to start with spouse. Then we're going to go to kids. Then we're going to go to mother, father, brother, sister. See, that's where we're going to go with educational sales. Then we're going to pay attention to their age. It's going to matter if they're 0 to 6 years old. It's going to matter if they're 6 years old to 18, 18 to 30, 30 to 50, 50 to 65. It's going to matter. When I see those different categories, these things register with me. I'm not going to be naive about this. Then I'm going to pay attention to the gender, especially with referrals. There's some referrals, like I told you, that I got a strong male, and I've got a passive female that's over 30 years old. I got a new patient. It's the source of getting it, either directly, which won't be as effective, spouse did a 4-wheel, new patient orientation well, or I'm just going to do direct marketing right to them. But that's going to be, again, that's as easy as it gets. And it's the best quality. These are the people that are easy to put through your patient education system. These are the people that already trust you to a certain degree. They already believe what you're saying. You don't have to overcome all these cold call terrible patients that cost a lot. So you don't want to spend any time or money on those types of people. But that's what most chiropractors do because they don't know any of this. So they'll hire an agency and they'll spend money on advertising. They'll even do name recognition advertising. That's when you know you really have somebody who's ignorant. Either they are or their agency is. These are the factors that make the difference. This is what you can do right or wrong. And you can see, you can go wrong fast. You can get 9 out of 10 of these right. You miss gateways, it's over. You miss geographic radius, it's over. You miss psychographic barriers, it's over. So it doesn't matter how good your educational sales is, your advertising, your direct response, but it doesn't matter if you violate some of these. So that's the first thing you have to get right. You got to be in the right lake fishing. Put yourself in the right lake where all the fish are. That's called a target market. And then which system I'll use will depend on if it's an 8%er or if it's a 92%er. Am I going to use advertising or educational sales? What type of advertising? Direct response. Well, how does that work? Okay. Then I want to use the campaign. See? Then when I do the advertising, I want as many of the 14 emotional triggers as possible. This is what significantly increases or decreases your effectiveness of new patients. And the good news is, the more you know this, the less you have to do it. And remember, it all starts with patient education. If you don't know how to keep patients, you're going to be in a whirlwind of trouble with marketing anyway. You have to be a black belt with new patients. You're losing patients left and right. You're going to need a lot of new patients. And it's a hell of a lot harder to get new patients than to keep them. Now, when you do know both, when you know how to keep them, that's why we pay so much attention to that. I don't need a whole lot of new patients at all to maximize my time for money. Then I'm going to use the most effective type of marketing in all these categories, and I don't need many at all. I may only need 5 or 10. And I've maxed myself out because I've got good patient retention. Now I can do the next thing. Start leveraging my time and money and go to the associate doctor. If you never get to that point, you'll never be able to hire an associate doctor. And if you do, it won't work out because it's going to cost you a ton of money. You don't have good patient retention, you're going to be in trouble. You don't know how marketing, in other words, you don't know how to get more business than you physically can handle, you'll never be able to hire an associate doctor. And if you do, they're going to now take from your money. And that's why 70% of associate doctors don't work out, because most doctors don't know this. That doesn't happen the way we do it. We get patient retention down, we get good at it. We don't have to be a black belt in educational sales or marketing. We just have to pay attention to the rules and guidelines. That creates more new patients than we physically can see, because the average chiropractor, when he has good patient retention, can only process 25 new patients a month. 25. That's if you're not as good. If you're really good at keeping them, 20. That's it, because you're limited by your industrial hours. You don't have 8 hours a day. You got 4. That's it. This is how it all comes together. And it's like a domino effect. You get patient education down, boom, that helps significantly. Add your marketing and educational sales or higher quality advertising. You don't need many new patients at all to maximize your time for money. In other words, your money for working. When you know them both, create more business than you physically can handle, you go to the associate doctor. Then you learn how to hire, train associate doctors. Your life changes forever. Now you have freedom and passive income. And now it's rinse and repeat. I don't have to learn anything new now. It's rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Go. So you see, the second office I opened was the hardest. And it was hard to train one person at a time initially to get all this down. And then it got easier and easier because I knew what I was looking for and I confined it and cleaned it up. So I'm training 7 doctors every 6 months, and they're coming out as black belts. I had 35 offices in 5 years. I would have none of that if I would not have known patient education or this marketing. I'd still be working today, and you would not be watching this video because I wouldn't have known enough to put this video together. All right, let me leave it like that. And then, of course, our marketing goes into great detail. So when we cover a program, now we have the foundational background and go, well, remember why we're doing this? Because you have to know the why behind everything. So when I do a spouse referral and I go, we're doing this, 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 and this, you now know why we're doing it. And you also know why not to change certain things. And that's what makes it work. And when you take a blueprint that works and you change it, you just crashed it. And I see that with doctors all the time. They'll change my patient education, crash it. They'll change the marketing or educational sales, crash it. You cannot take the blueprint of an F-16 and change it at all without crashing it. And it's true for any highly successful system. You can't go in and change highly successful systems. You got to do them to get the results of what they give. We'll see on the next marketing section, and we're actually going to be going into great detail in each one of these. In other words, exactly what to say and do and how, and especially with your team, because my team did all this. I trained my team to do all this. It was a new patient machine plugged into patient education, and it was just a money machine. That's how it works.